This past offseason, the New York Mets had a good amount of free agents, guys who had been on the team for at least a few years, who were now going to be able to test the waters of the market and potentially leave the Mets, a team that was coming off of a 101 win season. If you're a Mets fan, that's obviously not what you want to see, especially if you have an owner or ownership group who would not be willing to write the big checks to keep those guys in a Mets uniform. Well, good thing the Mets have the richest owner in the sport, someone who loves the team, and someone who is willing to write those big checks to keep his own players in a Mets uniform. Jacob deGrom led those names as someone who is now a free agent, and ironically, the Mets never actually came to an agreement with him, as he went down south to Texas to join the Rangers. As far as the rest of the Mets free agents went, though, Cohen did his thing and kept them in Queens. Brandon Nimmo, the team's best hitter who hit the market, would sign an 8-year, $162 million contract to keep him with the only team he's ever known. As far as the loss of deGrom went, Cohen looked elsewhere for help rather than in-house, signing 2022 American League Cy Young Award winner Justin Verlander, alongside Japanese pitcher Kodai Senga and lefty Jose Quintana. The whole Carlos Correa saga happened, and although he didn't end up there in the end, it was still a series of events that just continued to show how all-in Cohen is on this Mets team. There were a couple other moves he'd make, most notably for the bullpen, re-signing Adam Ottavino and bringing in David Robertson. Speaking of the bullpen, there was one huge question mark there, though, as the season came to a close. Ottavino had a good year last year with the Mets, David Robertson is a good addition, but what about the most important arm of the 2022 Mets bullpen? Edwin Diaz, the trumpet guy. He was a free agent. Would he be back? You betcha. In fact, re-signing Edwin Diaz was the first notable move made by the Mets this past offseason when Cohen whipped out his checkbook and gave Edwin Diaz the largest contract for a reliever in baseball history, breaking Aroldis Chapman's original deal of $86 million over 5 years with the Yankees following the 2016 season. So Diaz, not like he wasn't rich before, but he's a whole lot richer now. But this begs the question, was it a mistake made by the team to give Diaz this contract? But before we get any further, if you're new to the channel or just haven't subscribed yet, consider doing so. The contract, like I said, is the most money ever guaranteed to a relief pitcher, as it includes a $12 million signing bonus payable in January and salaries of $17.25 million in both 2023 and 2024, with it going up to $17.5 million in 2025. After the 2025 season, Diaz then has to decide whether to opt out or not. If he decided to opt in and stay with the Mets for 2026 and 2027, the final 2 of the 5 years, Diaz would make $18.5 million in both years. So even if he decided to opt into 2026 and then opt out prior to 2027, he still gets $18.5 million in 2026. If Diaz sticks through the contract all 5 years, there then is an option for a 6th year that could get the overall money from $102 to $122 million. But that's not all. New York will defer $5.5 million annually from 2023 to 2025 and $5 million each year in 2026 and 2027. There then is more money being deferred to Diaz starting in 2033 all the way until 2042. So the Mets will be paying Edwin Diaz until 2042 if he doesn't end up playing 6 more years in Queens. If Diaz plays that extra 6th year, the money will not be deferred and he'll just get it that season, the 2028 season. Diaz also gets a full no-trade clause through the 2025 season, and starting November 1st, 2025, he'll get a limited no-trade clause, allowing him to block trades to 10 different teams. 2022 was an incredible year for Edwin Diaz. There's no getting around it. It was the definition of elite for a reliever. He struck out 118 hitters in 62 innings, which is an average of 17 strikeouts per 9 innings, which is crazy. His ERA, which was already a low 1.31, should have actually been even lower according to the advanced stats. I mean, he just put up a clinic out there, but is 2022 the only good year Diaz has ever had? No, it's not. Edwin Diaz has put up a really nice career for himself so far. There's really only been 2 years where he truly just was not good, 2017 and especially 2019. In those 2 years, Diaz did not have a good fielding independent pitching, which basically tells you if you're getting lucky or unlucky on the mound when you compare it to your ERA. 2017 was still a good season results-wise, but he got a little lucky. In 2019, though, his first year with the Mets, Diaz had an ERA over 5.5, and it wasn't like it was in a small sample size either, as he threw 58 innings that year. Diaz has always struck a lot of guys out because of his pure stuff. He throws hard and has a nasty slider, but the biggest issue with him over his career, when he does struggle, has been his control. He'll walk a lot of people and then get himself into some trouble and then maybe give up the long ball, which is obviously all the last things you want from a closer in a close game. But again, in 2022, everything was on point for Diaz. He was just that good. But it once again begs the question, does Edwin Diaz deserve all of that money over half a decade? It could be a mistake. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that Edwin Diaz is going to be a bust. He's not going to live up to his contract. I'm not going to be rooting for the guy to fail. But I just don't know if it's ever smart to sign a relief pitcher to that much money. I think this is less about Edwin Diaz and more about relievers in general, the philosophy of how to build a bullpen. Now, what is good is Steve Cohen and how willing he is to pay his players. That's awesome, but is it smart to pay a reliever north of $100 million and north of $17 million per year? It's also a contract that only goes up in the dollar amount as the years go on. So it's not like they're paying him to be good now and then biting the bullet on the later years. No, it's not like we're talking about a 10-year deal here. But 5 and potentially 6 is still a lot of years, again, especially for a reliever. I never have too much trust in relievers because you never truly know what you're going to get out of them. It's rare to have guys like Kenley Jansen and Craig Kimbrell, relievers who were dominant in the best of the best for years on end, and even they have regressed a lot as of late. Mariano Rivera's don't come by often, if ever, so why pay a reliever like he's Mariano Rivera? Relievers tend to be very hit or miss. I know Diaz is currently one of the best closers in baseball as things currently stand, but that could change in a heartbeat. Aroldis Chapman was looked at as one of, if not the best reliever and closer in baseball when he got his big contract, and 5 years later, the Yankees could not wait to get rid of him. Another good example of this is Blake Treinen. In 2018, Treinen had one of the greatest seasons for a relief pitcher ever, pitching his way to a .78 ERA in over 80 innings. He was filthy and the most reliable bullpen piece in baseball. The very next season in 2019, he had an ERA right near 5 in about 58 innings. He's had some good years since, but is he worth what Edwin Diaz is making? No, of course not. And again, it's not like Diaz has only had one great year. He's had a few really good years, which is not why I'm saying this contract is a total mistake for the Mets. At least, not yet. It hasn't started yet. Time will tell if it is or isn't. I guess what I'm trying to say is that giving a relief pitcher a massive contract is too big of a risk. That's so much money going toward just one arm who only pitches so many innings to begin with. Yeah, he's a weapon. Yeah, he's incredibly valuable. And no, Steve Cohen does not care about the luxury tax. But say Diaz gets hurt, starts to have arm issues, or just simply regresses. You still have to pay him a guaranteed $102 million for him to not be as productive. Sure, you can say that about any player because the same goes for any player. Anyone can get hurt or regress. It happens. But it especially happens with relief pitchers, and I just don't know if committing to one north of $17 million guaranteed for at least 5 years is the smartest of moves. But yet again, who am I to say Diaz won't continue to be the best closer and help the Mets win a championship or two? That could happen as well, but that concern just is there for me. Let me know what you think. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.